Welcome to the IL Game Day Live show presented by the Season 2018 in STX. I am Terry Foy, joined by Dan Aburn. We are in College Park, Maryland Stadium for number 1 versus number 2. Dan, the Dane train is in town.
The Dane train is in town, Terry. You know, when we look at this weekend, this might be the best weekend in the entire year in terms of college lacrosse. We've got 4 great matchups that we're all going to talk about today, so let's get started.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, I am so glad and so excited to be here, but if I were at home on my couch with the slate of games that we have in store for us today, oh my goodness, what a consolation prize that would be. Not to mention the fact that Chapter 5 of the Season 2018 dropped last night. Opening whistle, it's your first in-season update, an unbelievable check-in for Duke, North Carolina, Syracuse, and Ohio State. Make sure as soon as this Game Day Live preview show comes down, head over to theseason2018.com to check out the latest chapter. It's an unbelievable accounting of North Carolina's win over Lehigh, that amazing overtime finish, their trip to Homewood Field and Timmy Kelly's inspiring performance, the way in which Syracuse rebounded from their opening season loss to Albany and came back and got a dramatic triple overtime victory over Army thanks to Ryan Simmons' game-winning goal. On and on, Duke's comeback over Denver was incredibly well spotlighted. So shout out to the season production crew. We're really excited. But Dan, like you said, we've got a lot to talk about, so we got to dive right in. We're going to go back to the Carrier Dome. Johns Hopkins makes the trip north. The Syracuse Orange coming off of their dramatic win over Virginia in Charlottesville last Sunday. You were in attendance. You saw Tucker Dordovic's game-winning goal. What are your initial thoughts, particularly given all that's up in the air surrounding who's going to be available to play for Syracuse today?
Well, the first thing I think about is how does Nate Solomon's absence in this game affect the Orange? And I think it's a big deal. You know, I think when you look at just the experience presence, he played all of last season, and now you got to kind of, you know, retool your offense before the biggest rivalry game of the season if you're Syracuse, basically. So I think that's one thing to watch. You know, I'm pretty sure they're going to go with Bradley Voigt in that spot, but you know, now it kind of comes down to, can the young guys step up again, like Tucker Dordovic, 4 goals in that game. Can he replicate that kind of success?
It'll be interesting to see how Johns Hopkins uses Pat Foley to play defense. You know, you probably would have assumed he was going to guard Solomon had he played, so to see the trickle down there is going to be an interesting aspect and subplot of this game. Another important place to focus is the face-off X. Hunter Moreland, a really nice performance in Johns Hopkins' win over Princeton.
Yeah, career high, 20 of 25 draws won in that game. Well, when you look what Syracuse did against Virginia, they were able to neutralize Justin Schwenk at the X. Can they replicate that kind of success against Hunter Moreland? And I think, you know, Hopkins' wing unit is very underrated. So I feel like, you know, if Hunter Moreland can replicate that kind of success, Hopkins has a great shot to end that drought in the Carrier Dome.
At the other end of the field, Syracuse has sustained some injuries. Tyson Bomberry has been out the last 2 games. It seems that Jared Fernandez, the freshman long pole, will not play in this one. There have been a couple other absences. I believe Andrew Helmer has been out for the last couple games as well. And yet, the Orange still look pretty good from a defensive personnel perspective. Johns Hopkins has been impacted, or the tone has been set offensively by the performance of Joel Tinney or Kyle Marr. How do you see this one unfolding?
Yeah, I feel like they got to do exactly what they did in that Princeton game, and they both said to me, we just let the game come to us. I feel like, you know, if you watch that Syracuse tape against Virginia, their poles were really aggressive. They were going out, they were getting on their hands, trying to be aggressive and be quick strike in the middle of the field if they got the opportunity. Wouldn't be surprised if they did that again. I feel like both these teams, though, they're going to try to find some rhythm at the face-off X and maybe control the tempo. But I would watch for that, you know, guys like Brett Kennedy, who had a breakout game against Virginia, to maybe replicate that success in this one.
What was interesting from and very promising coming away from that win over Princeton for Johns Hopkins was the emergence of some of their young players. Do you expect to see that continue in what has been a very difficult place for opponents to play, the Carrier Dome?
Yeah, Cole Williams, when you look at him, just 6'5", he's a stud. Like, he is gaining so much traction as a Dodger. And I feel like, you know, talking with Coach Petramala after that game, he said, you know what, he's been like this every game. I think he's just finally starting to hit those shots, playing a little bit more fundamentally sound. This could be like a coming out party for him if he gets, you know, some of the attention on that Syracuse defense is shifted to guys like Tinney, Stanwyck, and then don't sleep on the freshman Connor DeSimone. He kind of had a coming out party against Princeton. They inverted him a lot, and he was able to find a lot of success there. He's a guy who's played midfield and attack in his high school career, so he could play anywhere on that field.
This game is going to be available 1 p.m. ACC Digital Network. Ryan Powell will be on the broadcast. Yeah, I talked to him yesterday. He was excited about calling this one. Dan, who you got?
You know what? I like Hopkins in this game. I think Hunter Moreland, after last week, gives them a little bit of an edge. And I feel like they're going to come out emotionally charged in this game, and I think they might catch Syracuse off guard.
I'm going to go the other way. I've been picking the team that you just described in the sense of the one that is going to come with the emotional fire and maybe needs it more. It's going to be a theme that comes back later in this show. That being said, I do think that there's something about this Syracuse team that I really like, and I think they're kind of cresting. I still have some question marks about Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
Moving on. 2:30 p.m. ESPNU, the best of the West, one of the best series in all of college lacrosse. Denver, coming off of their Monday 10-6 victory over North Carolina in Chapel Hill, heads to South Bend to take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish squad, who sustained a setback last Saturday here in this stadium, 12-10 losers to the University of Maryland. There's so much to unpack here, but how do you characterize this series overall, particularly coming off of last year's quarterfinal game in which Denver just steamrolled through the Irish?
Yeah, an absolute mollywhopping what we saw in the quarterfinals last year, but that game is clearly the anomaly in this series. You know, if you look at some of the playoff games that they had in the past, and every game in the regular season, it's been a one-goal game. I think 7 of the last 9 have been decided by 1 goal. So this one, I'm expecting another close one, but I think we can't not start a conversation about Denver by not mentioning Trevor Baptiste. He's the ultimate X factor. How does Notre Dame attack him, especially if you look at that quarterfinal game from last year? He won 21 of 22 faceoffs, and that was what killed them last year.
Not to mention the fact that last week Notre Dame struggled facing off against Maryland freshman Justin Shockey. I believe he went 17 of 22 with something like 13 ground balls. And so I asked Kevin Corrigan after that game about the strategy to double pull the wings from the start. You saw Arden Cohen on the wing for the opening faceoff. He actually took a penalty coming down, crashing into the box. And really what Corrigan described was he needed to challenge his faceoff guys to at least make it a battle that included the wings. You can't lose the faceoff so cleanly that the wings can't get involved. Notre Dame, over the course of the last 5 years, has been able to be creative in the way that they strategize around both trying to muck up the faceoff X and get stops and convert that into possessions. What we saw against Maryland last week was a team that struggled to locate Connor Kelly, got burned a couple times by Jared Bernhardt, and I wonder how that translates into Denver's offensive efficiency. On our podcast this week, Quinn Kesnick talked about how you can't zone Denver. They're too skilled, and that's what North Carolina tried to do. Denver took advantage of that opportunity to play a relatively slow tempo. Notre Dame is not going to drop into a zone. They're going to pressure and challenge Denver's offensive players, but I am curious to see how that manifests itself as Ethan Walker and Austin French get involved.
Yeah, I would expect Notre Dame's defense to get out there, be aggressive on the poles, not give them shooting looks from range. I feel like if Denver's going to find any success in offense, it's going to be penetrating the interior of that defense. And also, you know, one thing that Notre Dame did last week against Maryland here was prepare for Connor Kelly as a shooter and not necessarily a passer. This could be a big game for Ethan Walker as a passer.
It'll be interesting to follow the goalie situation here. Matt Schmidt, the freshman, had been starting for Notre Dame in their first 2 games. He was replaced in the third quarter by junior Olin Malloy, who came on and played really well. I don't think we know who the starter is going to be just yet. So even if it is Malloy or Schmidt, keep an eye out for whether or not that player plays well, and there's a potential opportunity to shift if he doesn't. Same could be said for Denver. Alex Reddy is a multi-year starter, a little bit more of a known commodity. But when he struggled against Duke, we saw Bill Tierney make a change in that game as well. So just something to keep an eye on, a little bit of subtext. At the offensive end of the field for Notre Dame, the story coming away from last week was Ryder Garnsey. He finished with 7 points, but he only played 36 minutes. That meant he was on the bench for 24 minutes. When Garnsey was on the field, Notre Dame scored 8 of its 10 goals. In the 24 minutes he was off the field, they only scored twice. In addition, Maryland did a really nice job of limiting Brian Costabile, who had been among their leading scorers, as well as Brendan Gleason. They held him without a shot. He came in as Notre Dame's leading scorer. That said, Denver's defense is not Maryland's defense. What do you think Notre Dame wants to do and needs to do offensively in this one?
Well, I think they're going to start with Garnes. They're going to drive it through with him and X. But I feel like, you know, Brian Costabile is probably going to get that top LSM designation from Sean Mayle. Can he win that matchup? I feel like, you know, Notre Dame's entire defense kind of hinges upon that. You know, we've kind of talked about how they play such a tight offensive style. Only these guys can dodge. Only these guys can shoot. Those guys are going to have the green light in this game. So it really comes down to them winning their matchups. Can they do that?
It'll be interesting to see what type of utilization they give to Mikey Wynn, a player who has been at his best as a crease finisher. Carried the ball a lot against Maryland as well and struggled to create. And I think that for Denver, defensively, In this game, you're probably expecting to have to match feet with more guys than you traditionally would from a Notre Dame offense. You're just not sure who that's going to be. One guy to keep an eye on, Pierre Byrne, 2 goals and an assist versus Maryland. Did a really nice job of isoing from X, inverting, and creating some havoc for that Maryland defense.
Yeah.
All right, Tan, who you got in this one?
I can never pick against Denver. You know, it's Trevor Baptiste, man. Like, I call him the Lacrosse Death Star because he's just out there destroying planets.
I don't remember who I picked officially, so I'm just going to go off the cuff and say that, you know, I feel pretty good about Denver coming into this one, despite the quick turnaround, but because of their momentum, I think I'm going to go with the Pios as well. It's hard to shake the image of what they did to Notre Dame in the quarterfinals last year.
Absolutely.
3 p.m., Ridley Athletic Complex, this one available via the Patriot League Network and Facebook Live. The Duke Blue Devils come to town to take on the Loyola Greyhounds. The renewal of a series that, similar to the Notre Dame-Denver series and obviously the Johns Hopkins-Syracuse rivalry, has been a bellwether for these programs over the last decade or so. A lot of postseason history in this one as well. 2 years ago, Duke eliminated at the hands of Loyola. Give me what you got to start with this one.
Well, any other weekend, this might be the marquee matchup. But, you know, when you talk about this rivalry, I think back to that 2012 year when, you know, Loyola entered the season not ranked. Duke was one of the top 5 teams. Loyola hosted them, beat them, and that was kind of the coming out party that kind of led to that national championship this year. Could we see a similar narrative this year? I feel like what we're looking at with Loyola and Duke is 2 teams that have Final Four talent and are Final Four caliber. This one is, you know, it's the kind of like the number 4 matchup of the day, but I think the implications are just as big for all the other games going on.
I've been calling it the cherry on top of the Sunday that is March 10th in college lacrosse, and I think that by virtue of it coming last, it's going to be frenzied affair. And what it features is 2 of the best quarterback attackmen in all of college lacrosse, Loyola's Pat Spencer and Duke's Justin Gutterding. Just to start, realizing that they're not going to be competing against each other, how do you compare and contrast their styles?
Well, Patrick Spencer, just a huge physical specimen, and he's so good from behind the cage. Justin Gutterding is a little bit more of a cerebral player, but he's definitely improved his athleticism this year. I feel like you look at the defenses that Duke and Loyola have. Duke's defense is so very athletic. I think that they're going to be up to the task of defending Patrick Spencer. But, Foster Huggins and that Loyola defense, this is going to be kind of like a cerebral game for them. How does Duke attack them with their mind necessarily?
And so, looking at Loyola's matchup at the offensive end of the field, JT Giles Harris and Cade Van Raphorst are, the lockdown corners of this Duke defense. Is there one that you would expect to see match up against Spencer? Yeah,
I would expect to see Cade Van Raphorst in this game, just from a size perspective, athleticism perspective, and we're going to see JT Giles Harris possibly as the slider, so to speak.
At the other end of the field, I'm very interested to see what this Loyola defense does to prepare for Duke. On the podcast this week, Charlie Toomey talked about how Loyola is going to get coached up. Quinn talked about how Charlie is going to coach up his team. And Foster Huggins is one of the more underrated defensive players in all of college lacrosse. In addition, Duke's midfield attacks via a variety of players. I'm curious as to how that compares to Loyola's strength in the short stick defensive midi position. Is there one guy on Duke's offense that you would say, if he has a big day, I think that the Blue Devils are going to be okay?
Well, I feel like Peter Conley is probably the guy that they're going to hone in on, so I wouldn't sleep on Riley Walsh. I've really liked what I've seen from him in the early season. I feel like he's just stepped up his game so much in his sophomore season. We're seeing that sophomore bump at Duke, so to speak. I feel like if he has a big day in this one, it could go to the Blue Devils.
It's not just the sophomore bump, because freshman Joe Robertson is one of the leading scorers in college lacrosse. He's been a great goal scorer for the Blue Devils so far this season. And what's interesting from a Loyola defensive perspective is, do they put a guy like Paul Vellante on him? He's big, physical, doesn't necessarily need the quickness to match feet with a guy like Robertson, but can make it a really tough day. I think there's going to be a lot to unpack there. In addition to both ends of the field, the specialties are going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of similarities between the goalies, Jacob Stover and Danny Fowler, for Loyola and Duke respectively. They've played a lot. They're multi-year starters, but they aren't 57 to 60% guys. They tend to be in the 52 to 57% range, and both of their coaches are willing to make a move. just as in the Notre Dame-Denver game, it's an interesting storyline to watch. And then at the face-off X, both teams breaking in new guys at a position that has been traditionally a strength over the years. Do you see an edge between Brian Smith and Mike Warfiche?
Yeah, I feel like if there's one area of the field where Loyola can, hurt Duke, it's at the face-off X. I love what I'm seeing from Mike Warfiche early in the season, and then they have a great complement in Bailey Savio as the second guy. So I feel like if Loyola can win a lot of those draws, this game could go easily to the Greyhounds.
All right.
Yeah.
It could go easily to the Greyhounds, but now I'm going to put you on the spot. Who you taking?
I went on the record. I picked Loyola in this game. I think that, Ridley, that place is going to be bumping. It's a nice day. The sun is out. It's a little cold, but, those Charles Street crazies will be up for this one.
I am going to go the same way. I was talking to Jordan Wolf yesterday, and he made the comment that when they came up during this week, St. Patrick's Day, Loyola students have a certain reputation, that there were some fans in the crowd that made it difficult. He wondered how the young guys were going to react to that. So I think it's going to be a great one, a great capstone to this day. And now we got to get to the main event, number 1 versus number 2. It's going to start your day, noon on the Big Ten Network. But Dan, before we get into our analysis, when we go on site, we've got guests. So we're going to welcome in our guests right now. We've got Nick Manis, number 1, Nick Manis, number 2. So, Dan, we just pass the mics down. Mr. Manis, if you can pick up the mic right there behind you. Thank you for joining us on Game Day Alive. Nick Manis Jr., Nick Manis Sr. Nick, first of all, got to talk about the idea of winning a national championship. I mean, I know that, at this point we're on to the next year, but what was it like? Just tell us about that 2017 title run.
It was just awesome. Can't really put it into words. I think for everybody, like my dad, everybody who'd played there, everybody who'd worn the jersey, I think it was just so awesome because it was for those people. It wasn't really about just our team. It was about the whole history of the program. So that made it pretty sweet and definitely enjoyed it.
And Mr. Manis, we'll take a step in. And,
sure.
Kind of the same question to you. What was it like to watch that unfold?
Well, the first thing, we haven't stopped living it yet, so it's not over. Unbelievable. I played here 76 through 80. Lost in the national championship once, lost in 2 semifinals. So it was totally awesome. I never thought I'd, have a son. I never thought I'd have a son that be a captain of the team. Never thought I had a son that, it took us, 42 years to win it. So it's awesome.
And so, Nick, shifting the focus to today, number 1 versus number 2. We were talking in the office this week the last time a number 1 versus 2 matchup happened in College Park, and I think you were here for it, 2014 when Duke came to town. Mm-hmm. How do you feel like your former teammates are mentally preparing right now?
I think Coach Tillman does a great job of, it doesn't build up as number 1, number 2. It's just another game. They're focused on this week. They're focused on this game, focused on that opponent. So, that's kind of how they go into the games, and they prepare the same way for every team, no matter if it's number 1 team or, it's someone else. Every week, we get everyone's best, so we got to prepare for it.
And Mr. Manis, you've been a part of these game day environments for a really long time. Albany brings with them kind of a special vibe. They're new to the scene. They play fast in an exciting style, and certainly with Tahook and Anacoke, they've got star power, Connor Fields, T.D. Erlin, some of the biggest names in college lacrosse as well. Just being outside and getting a sense of the vibe an hour before game time, what's your impression?
The fans are ready. The tailgate is in high gear. The parents are ready. And the one thing that Maryland does have is a great following. Excuse me. And the parents are all geared up. The crowd is ready, and it's going to be an exciting game today.
And Nick, you've been a part of preparing from a game plan style for these matchups. And take us back to last year's quarterfinals against Albany and what the game plan was kind of like.
Albany's a really great team. They have a lot of great parts. We try to focus a lot on ourselves, and I'm sure they're doing the same thing this year. There's only certain things you can control. You play your best. You have some great players. They're going to make plays. But, you can really only focus on what you control, and that's yourself. So that's basically it.
And what have you seen from this team so far this year?
It's unbelievable how they've continued to play at the high level. They haven't lost yet. So I think their streak's maybe 12 games since last year. You have some great leaders that are still playing with Connor Kelly and Morris and Rotan. So they're really playing like a team, continuing to play as a team, very unselfish. You can't tell who's the leading scorer. You can't tell who the top defenseman is. They're just playing really good and cohesive lacrosse.
And how excited are you for this one?
Oh, man, I'm pretty pumped. It's my first time back checking them out since last year, so I'm definitely excited. Definitely excited.
Well, we want to thank you for your time and joining us here on the Isle Game Day Live. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask for a prediction because I don't think there's going to be much variety in that one. But yeah, we hope you enjoy the day. And once again, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, and as we welcome back in Dan Aburn for the finale, the final segment of this Isle Game Day Live show. Dan, Nick just showed us the back of his T-shirt. This is going to be a day characterized by T-shirts, and we're going to start by talking about team impact. So this is a member of the Maryland team who, those of you that followed the 2016 team's storyline will remember Finn walking off the field with Coach Tillman after the game. A very, very meaningful experience that squad was a part of, and then obviously for his opportunity to be a part of the national championship run as well. Very, very cool thing that the Terps do. But it doesn't end there. That's not the only T-shirt situation we've got going on. As you know, InsideLacrosse.com/store is your place to find IL apparel, and we've got our team T-shirt series going. We've got two. Both teams are represented today. The Dane Train and Be the Best are in effect. Now, Dan, we've also got. Oh, wait, I think I hear it in the distance. Do we have a limited edition one coming?
Yeah, man, it's a big one. Let's get it out there, Terry.
So this one not available for purchase, but friends of the program, we'll say, have an opportunity to check out Tahoka versus everybody.
It's pretty cool.
How big of a game are you expecting from Tahoka today?
I'm expecting a big game. I feel like he answered the bell in that big game against Syracuse. I feel like we're going to see him step up in this game. I don't know how many goals he's going to have, but I do think he's going to have an impactful performance today that could affect the Danes.
Noon, Big Ten Network, number 1 versus number 2. Albany Great Danes enter the game. Top-ranked team in the country. The hosts come in number 2 off of a win over Notre Dame. A lot to unpack here, Danny boy.
A whole lot to unpack.
So, T.D. Erlin, the faceoff specialist for the Great Danes, 91% so far this year. The sophomore was clearly, definitively the second-best faceoff specialist in the country last year and has taken his game to another level.
Yeah, winning at 91% so far through the season, that's kind of leaps and bounds better than what Trevor Baptiste is doing right now, so we might have to start putting him in the conversation.
Albany coming off of a midweek win over UMass after kind of a nip-and-tuck performance against Cornell last week, a game that was moved to Sunday. They had to come back. I believe they scored 3 late goals in order to settle the final 2-goal margin of victory. Where do you feel like Albany is right now, 4 games into this season?
I feel like they're still a little bit soul-searching a little bit, but I feel like this game is going to reveal so much about their identity. We're going to know, how do we stack up against a team that just won the national championship? One of the teams that year in and year out is a premier program in the sport. I feel like we're going to learn a lot about this Albany team today, and we'll see how it pans out.
So at the offensive end of the field for the Great Danes, they've not only been dominating possession, they've also been extremely prolific and extremely efficient. And it starts with senior attackman Connor Fields, who, to me, the story of his career is progression. So as a lefty goal scorer paired with Lyle Thompson as a freshman, he put up 60 goals. Became a little bit more of a quarterback dodger with still kind of a 2/3, 1/3 goal scoring point distribution as a sophomore, and then last year really took another step forward as a distributor, and you're going to see one of the most complete players in college lacrosse today. Now he's got a partner in crime in IL's #1 rated recruit in the class of 2017, Tahoka Nanticoke. He was on the cover of our October issue of the magazine. He's been our Twitter and Instagram avatar for 4 months. I mean, this guy does it all, and he produces highlights. It's unbelievable. You've gotten to know him. You've seen him play multiple times over the course of his career to get to this point, and we were at his college debut in the Dome 3 weeks ago. Give me your initial rundown of Tahoka Nanticoke.
Well, I want to kind of preface this by thinking about the entire defensive matchup, and I feel like what we saw in that Syracuse game was a defense that actually matched up well against Albany, and they still hung 15 on them. So I'm curious to see how this one pans out, because what I look what Maryland has for its defensive personnel, they got their #1 guy and Bryce Young, and then they got Curtis Corley, who is as close to a #1 defenseman as you can get. He's also one of the strongest guys on the team, so I'm expecting him to line up against Tahoka Nanticoke in this game, and it's going to be a great matchup from a physical perspective. We're going to see them squaring up, kind of like throwing bodies, throwing shoulders a little bit. I feel like This game, though, it could come down to the short stick matchups. I feel like they're going to try to cut off Fields. They're going to try to cut off Tahoka. So this could be a big game for guys like Sean Echols, Kyle McClancy, the guys on the outside who might be getting some looks.
At the other end of the field, Connor Kelly changed his jersey from number 40 to number 1, joining a legacy of 7 straight Maryland offensive players who have worn that number and earned All-America recognition. He is the consensus midfielder of the year. To this point, he's coming off of a 3-goal, 7-assist performance versus Notre Dame that, for me, was transcendent. It took him to another level. You know, this is one of 3 college players, current college players, that got a shot with the Team USA training squad that persisted through the fall. I am so impressed by the evolution of his game, where originally as a sophomore, got the first opportunity to start consistently. He was a step-down shooter. Last year as a junior, a member of a national championship team, he was a Dodger. This year, he's an all-around player, a feeder, scorer, unbelievable. What do you make of Connor Kelly and how Albany is going to prepare to slow him down?
Well, I've seen this Maryland team so much over the past 4 to 6 years, and one thing I kind of think about with Connor Kelly is there's been games where they've stopped Matt Ramo, they've stopped Colin Heacock, they've stopped these other great players. I can't recollect a game where they've honestly said, we stopped Connor Kelly. You look at what he did last year, Big Ten final, huge game against Ohio State. In a pinch against Denver in the Final Four, he had every single goal that got them back into that game. I feel like you just can't stop him. We're going to see him come through some way in this game when the moment is biggest, I think, too. And I think he's going to be a difference maker.
And also in goal, a very interesting matchup. Maryland returns Dan Morris, a national championship winning goalie. Albany, J.D. Colarusso, saving 65%, has been one of the best goalies in the country so far this season, and that's a little bit surprising from the senior. That being said, enough to keep this game tight. What is your expectation, not on the winner just yet, but in terms of what the pace of the game is going to be?
Well, I feel like this game could play out in so many ways, and I'm envisioning all these kind of different scenarios. I could see Maryland blowing Albany out. I can see Albany dominating the faceoff X and blowing Maryland out. But I think what we're going to see is something in the middle. I feel like both teams are going to push the pace. They're going to look for those opportunities in the middle of the field and try to capitalize.
Dan, it's time. Who you got?
I went on the record picking the Dane train, man. I'm feeling the Danes. I feel like the moment is right for them. They're going to win this game. But, Terry, I will say this. Whoever loses this game will be better off for it because they will go to the film, they will go back to the drawing board and say, hey, this is what we can work on. We might see this team again somewhere down the road.
It's amazing. I mean, when you consider the fact that this has emerged as a really good series with so many nuances, check out InsideLacrosse.com for Casey Vox's story on Scott Marr and his relationship with this Maryland team with Coach Adele. I mean, there's so much intertwined history between these two programs, not the least of which has been, as we mentioned, last year's quarterfinal game. They've also played in the regular season each of the last 2 years as well, so a lot to look forward to in this one. I'm right there with you. So I've been picking the team that I felt like needed the win more, and not only do I think Albany needs this win more than Maryland does from a future NCAA tournament seeding perspective, I also feel like they will come in more motivated because of the way last year ended, so I'm right there with you. I'm picking Albany. Dan, it's been an awesome IL Game Day Live.
Yeah.
Presented by the Season 2018 and STX. As I said at the beginning of the show, Chapter 5 dropped yesterday. It's amazing. Go to theseason2018.com right now to check it out. Make sure you get back in time for noon, BTN, checking out the number 1 versus number 2 teams in college lacrosse. From there, 1 p.m., ACC Digital Network, Syracuse versus Johns Hopkins. 2:30, ESPNU, Duke versus Denver. 3 p.m., Patriot League Network, Facebook Live, Duke versus Loyola. It's an unbelievable day in college lacrosse, and we are so glad that you guys joined us to check out this IL Game Day Live preview show.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy all the games.